We're going to learn the second Sicha Vayetze, Chelek Tezvav. That's Chelek Tezvav, Amid, page 231. We will not go through the whole Sicha inside. We'll go through the main Nekudas, the main parts of the Sicha. In the beginning of the Sicha, the Rebbe brings down, or the Gemara brings, that Avram used the expression of Har regarding the Beis HaMikdash. By Yitzchak, it uses the expression Sodeh, and by Yankiv, it uses the expression of Bayis, Beis Elokei Yankiv. And the Meforshim explained that the union of Har, Sodeh, and Bayis is referring to the three Bati Mikdash, and after the Bayis Hashlishi, which was Kovua, which was set, which will not be a Churban afterwards, is the union of Abayis, which Bayis shows an Amokim Kovua Venitzchi, an everlasting Bayis. And this is connected to the union of Yankiv, as we know that Yankiv is a Nachlo Belim Tzorim. Yankiv is the level of without any Hagbolus, Ufaratz to Yom of a Kedma, with Sofed of a Negba, and therefore, Dafki Yankiv, which is connected to the union of Beli Gvul, he is connected to the third Beis HaMikdash, which is the union of Beli Gvul. Peil Mamish, the Rebbe asks, how does this idea fit with the life of Yankiv? We see that the whole life of Yankiv was a lot more, the Hepech HaYisyash was a lot less settled than Avraham and Yitzchak. He was an Eifon of Geir Ba'oretz, Roim HaYushnei Yimei Shnei Chayai. He first ran away from Esav, Yankiv in Beersheva. He was in Choron, in Lovan Garti, and then the story with Yosef, then he went to Mitzrayim. So seemingly the concept of Yankiv is connected to Bayis, and Yankiv is connected to the union of Kviyas, is L'chura the opposite of Yankiv's life himself. The Rebbe brings down the pasuk in Yeshaya, which we mentioned before, Beis Elokei Yankiv, and let's see the entire pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'holchu amim rabim, v'omru l'chu v'na'ale el har Hashem, el Beis Elokei Yankiv, v'yireinu midrocha v'neilcha be'ercheisav." This pasuk is talking about that Goyim, amim rabim, will say, "Let's go to the Beis HaMikdash." And here the Rebbe asks another shayla, and the pasuk ends off, "Ki mitziyin teisei seira udvar havayim Yerushalayim." And here we have to understand, first of all, why is it that when it talks about the union of Beis Elokei Yankiv, we're coming to be madgish to emphasize that the Beis HaMikdash is the union of Abayis? Why does the pasuk say it regarding to Amim Rabim? Why does the pasuk say it regarding to nations? The fact that the Beis HaMikdash is Beis Elokei Yankiv is a fact that the Beis HaMikdash is a Bayis. Why is it expressed after in that Amim Rabim will go to the Beis HaMikdash? And second of all, what is the reasoning of Ki mitziyin teisei seira dvar havayim Yerushalayim? We know Bechlal that we know that in Torah every word is meduyik. Even when we talk about poems and songs, for example, Shiras Hayam, the Rebbe brings down, every word is meduyik. And Rashi always explains why different words look as if they're doubling themselves. So why does the pasuk say twice, Ki mitziyin teisei seira udvar havayim Yerushalayim? So we understand from this that Tziyah and Yerushalayim are two different levels, and from this come out two things. There's the union of Torah and the union of Dvar Hashem. Let's see inside from Sif Gimel. Der Chiluk zwischen Torah und Dvar Hashem. The Gemara sagt Dvar Havaye zu halacha. Dvar halacha brura. Mashe'inkin Teira is Keil Eichin Yoni Shakla V'Tarye Kosal Kedaitig Welchem Efrekt Ob V'Chulu. We know that every part of Teira is Dvar Havaya. We know that even like the Rebbe emphasizes Kosal Kedaitig, even something the Gemara says only as a Havamin, as a Svara, which the Gemara afterwards asks a question on. It's also part of Teira. Many times the Rebbe used to say V'Horaye. A person, let's say, got up in the morning and he said Birkas HaTeira, and then he learned the line of Gemara, which was only a kasha, and then he went, he finished his learning. It's still a good Birkas HaTeira, because it's a part of Teira. The Rebbe brings on order 29, what it says in L'Kuti Levi Yitzchak, many times the Rebbe used to quote this, that every part of Teira, even something the Gemara says that it doesn't make sense, it's also Dvar Hashem. And the Lashon is even something the Gemara says, Bedusa. Bedusa means something which cannot be explained. The Eibishter said this Svara and the Eibishter said Bedusa. These are the words of the Eibishter Mash. So every single part of Teira is Dvar Hashem, and but together with that we find that various parts of Torah, there's a shakla v'tarya. Like the Rebbe brings down, it's not cut clear. There can be a swara lekan, it's not a cut clear thing. We gefind benegea min hagim, was Torah sagt, man soll sich führen in jeden Ort, like min hagi hamokim. Yeah, certain places, certain minhagim. And Torah says you have to consider the minhagi hamokim. Ich ben yoni halachi, ken zayn achiluk mimokim lumokim, b'v'loshen hashas, as ba'asrei de Rav, you're living in Rav city, you have to pass like Rav. You're sitting in Shmuel city, you have to pass like Shmuel. Al derech zeh afilu b'machleikes von Beishama in Beis Eider, es ist abgepasst geworden, der halachi ki Beis is jeder von zeh, hat sich gefühlt mit sein Shit. The Gemara says, at the beginning, when this Shama in Beis started, there was the big machlekes. Before we finalized that we passed like Beis, every place had his minute, had his place, had his way how he conducted the halach. Nochmer, afilu nochdem vim hot gepasst in die halacha wie Beis, bis as bis Shammai b'mokem Beis eino mishne. The Gemara says halacha is like Beis, and it's as if bis Shammai, as if that in the world of halacha doesn't exist. Is elu ve'elu divrei elikim chayim. V'chas v'sholem leimar as das bis Shammai is nit kein Chelek von Torah. Was demult hat nit kein Scheiches zu ganz Torah. Like the Rebbe brings the Rambam, if someone says even one word of Torah Sheba'al Peh that's not from the Eibishter, he's called a min. He's like an apiketis. If someone says even an halacha from Bishamai, which the halacha is not, we're not allowed to pass it like Bishamai, he says it's not from the Eibishter, then he's arguing not only on this particular halacha, he's arguing on the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh. So on one hand we see that we have to pass in certain ways, on the other hand we see that elu ve'elu, divrei elikim chayim. And the Gemara, the Rabbi continues, we say the mizu, I feel al salkadaitach on a kashin Gemara, ich sehe seinen achelik von Torah, nicht nur mit Pi Hagvura. Und a viele wenn eine lernt nur dem salkadaitach und die kashe von Torah, nicht lernen dich b'shah zu dem askone und dem Torah, as mentioned before, a person got up in the morning, he only learned the kashe, and that's all, that was his learning for the day. Is a mechoyev b'rikas ha-Torah. Und sagt auf dem Salkedaitach und Kasche, as eichiv der Day is ein halacha kemeisa v'nos alon es terasa. He says, you gave him, the Eibishter gave us his Torah, and what is he saying it on? He's saying it on an opinion which is not accepted l'halacha. He's saying it on a svore, on a Salkedaitach, on which the Gemara disproves. And still we say it's the Eibishter's Torah. So how does these two things fit together? On one hand we see that there's every part of Torah is Torah, every shaklavitari of Torah is Torah. There's different minhagim, various halachas. Even what Bishamai says is part of Torah. On the other hand, we see there's a part of Torah called halacha. Dvar havayezu halacha. Once that the Gemara paskin, this is the halacha, then this is the halacha. And this is already not depending on different minhagim and different places. Certain things which the Gemara didn't come to a clear conclusion, so it's totally the minig, totally in the place. But when we say this is the halacha, this is final, clear, we clarify the inyan, the concept, then this is the way we got to do it. And there's no two ways about it. So how, and then someone will say, what do you mean? But it's part of the Eibishter's Torah, I want to do the other way. No, you have to do it this way. So how does these two aspects come together? On one hand we say that every part of Torah is Torah. Halacha, aminig, asvore, it's accepted la not accepted la If it's mentioned in Torah, it's Dvar Havaya. On the other hand we say, Dvar Havaya zu halacha, there's a psak halacha, we cannot move from that. The Rebbe explains in Seif Dalet. We will first say it, give an introduction what the Rebbe is going to explain here. In Chassidus explains, if we look at the Loshen of the Pasuk, Va'avaye imay, the Pasuk says this concerning David HaMelech, Va'avaye imay shehalacha kemaisai. The Eibishter was with David HaMelech, which means the halacha was paskin like David HaMelech. So when we talk regarding halacha, we use the name of Shem Havaya. But when we are talking b'negeya the inyan that every part of Torah is considered Torah, we use the loshen elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. We use the loshen of Shem Elokim. We know that Shem Havaya and Shem Elokim are both shemis from the Eibishter. They're both from the 7 shemis which cannot be erased. They're both holy shemis. But there's still a difference of Shem Havaya and Shem Elokim. As we know, in many places, Shem Havaya is called Shem Ha'etzem, Shem HaMeferish. What is the difference of Shem Havaya and Shem Elokim? When we learn Chassidus, You understand that the concept of Hashem is a certain gather. A shame is a certain description. A shame is a certain definition. This is the meaning of a shame. When we say the Eibishter has shemes or mides, means in a certain ways how the Eibishter expresses himself. It could be a shame of chesed, for example, shem keil b'chesed, shem olikim b'gvura. Every shame has a certain midah of the Eibishter, a certain tziyur, how the Eibishter is expressing himself and being nizgala through this shame. Shem Havai is called Shem Ha'etzem because Shem Havai refers to the Eibishter, how he's higher than any description, higher than any definition. In other words, Shem Elikim is how we connect to the Eibishter through a channel of Medida v'Hagbola, through a certain Midah. And Shem Havai refers to the Eibishter, how the Eibishter is Lomailo Mimdida v'Hagbola. This is the difference of Shem Havai and Shem Elikim regarding the union of Torah. What does it mean when we say Eilu ve'Eilu Divrei Elikim Chaim? We mentioned before about Bishamai and Beis Hillel. And we say that even though the halacha is like Beis Hillel, and we're not allowed to pass like Beis Shammai. A person is not allowed to conduct himself like Beis Shammai, still it's part of Torah. We know the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya, in the Akdama of Tanya, the reason why Beis Shammai is always being machmir and Beis Hillel is always being mekil, that's because the Sheidesh HaNeshama L'mayla, where the Sheidesh HaNeshama of Beis Shammai is coming from Gvura, and the Sheidesh HaNeshama of Beis Hillel is coming from Chesed. There's Sfiras HaChesed and Sfiras HaGvura L'mayla. The Esser Sfiras, which, like we said before, are the shemes of the Eibishter. And the Eibishter could express himself in a way of chesed, and the Eibishter could express himself in a way of gvura. How does this come down Lomata? When chesed comes down Lomata, we say, oh, we have a shaila, if this thing, for example, is kosher or not. Could we be mile this thing to kedusha or not? So chesed, if we look at it in the chesed view, so we say, okay, we could be mile, we're going to be mekil. If we look at it in the gvura view, what are we going to say? We cannot be mile, we have to be machmir. And therefore, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, which Beis Shammai was connected to the Sheidesh HaNeshama coming from Gvura, he was more machmir, and Beis Hillel, which is Sheidesh HaNeshama, was from Chesed, was more mekel. So these two svaris, whether it's kosher or apostle, both are true. Both have a mokir v'sheidesh l'mayla. There's different ways, different midis of the Eibishter, different expressions of Elokus, and the Eibishter, because of his being bligvul and because of his shleim, is going to express himself in all different types of ways. So when the Eibishter is being expressed, the Lukus is being expressed in the channel of Chesed, then it reflects that in Teira, that the Svara, which is being understood in Teira, the Svara of Chesed, that we're saying kosher, and when the Eibishter is being expressed in the channel of Gvura, so then it reflects in Teira, the Eifan of we go L'chumre, and we say, no, it's Usr, we cannot be Mailadis. And that's how it is in every single Svara of Teira. Every single Svara of Teira, the Tanoim, the Meiroim, and like we know the famous word, the Rebbe many times used to quote, which is a Svarim, that all these Sforim until the Taz V'Shach or till the Marsha were written Beruach HaKadosh. This all was connected with, parallel to the Sheidesh HaNeshama L'maylo, to Sfiras Olyenis. And that's the Pshat Eilu v'Eilu Divrei Elokim Chayim. And therefore it's also explained in Chassidus that the word Elokim is a Lashon Rab, a Lashon plural, and so is the Lashon Chayim. Because this madregi of Shem Elikim, which refers how the Eibishter is expressed in different siyurim, in different dimensions, in different expressions. There's Yischalkus, many different ways, Chesed and Gvura. And then there's Chesed, Shebech Chesed, Gvura, Shebech Chesed, and Chesed, Shebech Gvura, and so on. And that's how it is in every single Svara of Teira. But again, as said before, this is all, when we're talking about Elokus, how he's in a way of tziyur, of Medida v'Hagbola. Then comes a higher madrig, and that's Shem Havaya. Shem Havaya is believable. What does it mean believable? There's no Hagbola. This is a madrige which is higher than Esesfiris, higher than Metzias, higher than Seder Ishtalshalos. That's Shem Havaya. When it comes to limud ha'alocha, what does halacha mean? Halacha means halacha l'maisa. Halacha means how we carry down the inyan of Teira, not only in Elam Esruchnim, how this is brought down lemata in Elam Hazeh Agashmi, how we actually conduct ourselves bepeil mash. The halacha part is connected to Shem Havaya. And why is that? Explain the Chassidus Ba'arichis. When we talk about Gvul and Bli Gvul, when we talk about the inyan of a madrega, a level which is limited, and a level which is unlimited, expresses itself in many different ways. Zman, time, and mokim, place, level. Up to which level could this inyan, could this Eid Eliki reach? When we talk about the madrega of Shem Elikim, it's a mugbal dike level. And therefore, it can only be meir, it can only affect an Elam Esruchnim. It does not come down to Elam Hazeh HaGashmi. But when we talk about Shem Havaya, which is an Eid without any Hagbolah, this, because it has no Hagbolah, is not only limited to Elam Esruchnim, not only limited to the world of Seichel, it comes down till Mato Mato till Elam HaMaisa. And this is the Yin of Halacha. The Yin of Halacha is how you mamshich the Eid Eliki here lemato in Elam Hazeh HaGashmi. But in order to be mamshich an Eid Eliki so low until Elam Hazeh HaGashmi, it has to come from a very high level, from Shem Havaya. And only when we reach Shem Havaya, then is halacha kemeise, we come to the halacha. And therefore, because we are talking about a level of Shem Havaya, which is Bli Gvul, in that level there is no hischalkus. That level there can only be one. That level is only one way. There isn't many different madreges. Where is there hischalkus, a division? We talk about a darga which is mugbal, where there's different hagbolas, different siyur, different dimensions. When we talk about Bli Gvul, it's wherever it is, it's all the same. It's not changeable. And that's the Nekud the Rebbe is mashbeh here in Dalet. Let's see inside. Hagam is alle days mecholokis und pluktis in Gemore und as ich die Inyonim von Kesal kedaitig bekashes Shabbatere sein a chelik von Tere Elu ve Elu divri lekim chayim wer die halache gepasket nor wie ein Dehe und wir loschen a Gemore wa avayi imei she halacha kemeisei halacha und der is chalukes seine bedugma sachiluk von Shem Havaya und Shem Elikim chayim, the world of halacha and the world of where you have different opinions, Shakla V'Tarya, this is the actual difference of Shem Havaya and Shem Elikim. Was beide seine von der sein Shem is Shein im Chok. Und es ist Yodua der Bir Bozeh Elikim Eich Elikim Chayim. Was ist Hecher von Elikim Stam? Yeah, there's a level of Elikim, there's Elikim Chayim, is even higher Madrege. Is Loshen Rabbim. Wo das weiß, da Faribui Bechinnis und Ischalkus Kaviyochel. Der Riber ist es azay eichen Teire. Als mit Zad Elikim Chaim ist Shaykh der Inyan Ischalkus von Elu vo Elu. And as we said before, Ischalkus is connected to Gvul, to limit. Because what does Ischalkus mean? I'm only here, I'm not here. I'm limited to a certain madrege. And then there's another madrege. I am not everywhere. That's the concept of Gvul. Aber Havayi Shem HaMefeirosh, Shem ha'etzem, Shem ha'miyuchod, which is l'maylo me'ischalkus. Was der Riber wird von Shem Havaya nimshach der Linie von halacha psuko in Teire davke ein Dehe. So now we understand what the Pasuk says, Va'avayi imei, through connecting to Shem Havaya, you come to the halacha. How we connect to such a high madrege, and why not everyone succeeded to come to this level of Va'avayim Yalocha Kemeisei, we'll see in the continuation of the Sicha. And now in Sifhei, going back to the Pasuk of Kimitzien Teitzei Seira Udvar Havayim Yerushalayim. So we start understanding when it says Kimitzien Teitzei Seira is talking about the general part of Teira. Udvar Havayim, when we emphasize Shem Havaya, that is referring to the Chelek HaHalocha Shabbatere, V'Havaya Imei. And the Rebbe connects that to the Inyan of Tzien and the Inyan V'Yerushalayim. So, let's understand what the Rebbe explains here in Sifhei and Vav. This is a very, very deep Sicha, very geschmackes Sicha, and it's important to mention, like in Ahara 40, this Inyan is mentioned in many places in Chassidus, and it's interesting that many places in Chassidus we find various explanations, and in some places even another way, in a different way, how explained in this Sicha. And the Rebbe makes a note of it in the end of Ha'ara 40, and throughout different Ha'aras in the Sicha, Ha'ara 52, Ha'ara 55, and Ha'ara 65, the Rebbe makes a note of different places where the explanation is different. Let's focus as of now what the Rebbe explains in this Sicha here. What does the word Tziyin mean, and what does the word Yerushalayim mean? The word Tziyin and Yerushalayim, Bepashtos, is referring to the same city, Yerushalayim, or we call it with two different names. The word Tziyin in Lashon HaKodesh means a simin. A simin. What does a simin mean? When you say something is a simin, you're a simin for something. It means that you're reflecting something higher than you. That's what a simin means. Just like begashmis, when you say something, there's a simin. I have a hat, and there's a simin on the hat. The simin shows this hat belongs to that and that person. It shows on something else. What is the simin of Yerushalayim? The simin of Tziyin? And Ruchnius. It's not only the physical city of Yerushalayim, the physical city of Yerushalayim, what the Rebbe brings, what the Gemara says, the Medrash says, is Mechuvin Keneged Yerushalayim Shel Mailo, which means Yerushalayim Shel Mato, the physical city of Yerushalayim, was a reflection and connected a Yid to higher than that. Then we have another name we call Yerushalayim, and that's Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim is put together from two words, Yerushalayim, which means when a person came to the city of Yerushalayim, he got a big, he was elevated, was nisalot, a high level of Yireh, as brought down that when a person came, he brought the Ma'aser Sheni to Yerushalayim, he came to Yireh as Hashem Elokecha. He came to a level of Yireh, he saw the Kedim, he saw the Aved, he saw the Levim, it brought him to a very high level from Yireh as Hashem. Now, seemingly Tzin and Yerushalayim both are bringing out the point that Yerushalayim, the physical Yerushalayim, is showing on something, reflecting something higher. So what is the difference whether you say the Inyan of Tziyin or the Inyan of Yerushalayim? So the Rebbe explains, let's see it in how it's in Aveda, how the Rebbe explains in Seivov. Like we said before, Siman means a reflection. It shows on something higher. Now, there's two aspects over here. On one hand, we're saying that this reflects something higher. But it reflects something higher. I am not that higher thing. I am what I am. And I am reflecting something higher. I'm a siman on something higher. But I am still a metzias on my own. I wasn't totally mevatel my metzias. I'm connected to something above, but I didn't lose my metzias entirely. In Chassidus we call it many times, there's bittul hayesh, bittul b'metzias, different levels of bittul. There's a bittul where the bittul, I'm bottle, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, but it's all in accordance to my metzias. I didn't lose my metzias. Then we have the inyan of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim means that not that I reflect something higher. The bittul, that something higher, becomes you. That becomes your mahus. Yerushalayim are two words which put together the word of Yerushalayim. That is what Yerushalayim is about. Not that we call Yerushalayim as a tziyin, as a simin to Elokus. Yerushalayim itself is Elokus. Let's see Seivov inside. Die zwei Beginnes Hanal, Tziyin in Yerushalayim, seinen Do'eich in die Darge so Avede von Eden. Worum geschehen wie der Eibester Bochar Beret Yisrael, Azeich Bochar Lechelka Yisrael. It says in Medrash that the Eibester chose Eretz Yisrael, and he chose a land, and he chose a nation. And he gave the chosen land to the chosen nation. So we see there's a connection. So all the inyanim we find in Eretz Yisrael, they reflect in Klal Yisrael. Azev in Yerushalayim, sein voran die zwei Beginnes ziehen in Yerushalayim. Auf derech ze sein ich bei Eden, bei Vidosum voran die zwei Beginnes. Yerushalayim al Shem Yira al Shem Sholem is in Aveda the Madrege von Tachlis u Shleimus Hayira ve'Abitel. Sein Horeven und Eis Edel in sich in an Eifon as ein ganze Metzies is Yira. You are refined. You are mezachich yourself. Your Metzies changed. You became bottle. You are bottle. That's a Bittel Betachlis. Then we have Tzien Miloshen Simen. Is der Eifon Avede von Aiden, durch welchen der Greich zu werden a Tzien Simen von the Inyonim Nailim in Elokus Lamayla. You reflect higher in Yonim. Is noch in dem Zier von Ametzies und nicht Betachlis Habitl. Aber sein Metzies ist als is gearbeitet, as is a Simen of the Inyonim Shalamayla. He's refined enough to be able to reflect something higher, but he's not totally changed. And this is the pshat in the pasuk. Ki mitzien teisei seiro dvar havayim Yerushalayim. When we talk about Teira Bichlal, it's enough to learn a eifan of tzien. But when we're talking about dvar havayim, we're talking about halacha, we have to be in a level of Yerushalayim. Now let's explain this a little bit. Maybe we'll use a dugma, an example, a moshel, to get it a little bit better. Let's take, for example, B'nefesh Ha'adam. We know there's various keiches, keich ha'seichel, halicha, tnuah, walking, going, seeing, hearing. And then there's the keich, which is above all the keiches, we call it the keich ha'ratzon. What is the difference between all the keiches, the way all the keiches work, and the way ratzon works? How do all the keiches connect to the guf, and how does ratzon connect to the guf? You'll say example, we'll talk about keich hariyah, in the eye. So we know that every keich has a certain keli, a certain part in the guf, which is a keli because of its characters, because of its metzias, to be able to accept this keich, and the keich hariyah can see through the eye. So we have here a connection of the keich, the nefesh, the keich hariyah shebenefesh with the eye, the keich haseichel with the brain. So on one hand, the keli must be nisbatel, the guf must be nisbatel to the keich, to accept the keich, and to let the keich work and be nisgala through it. But on the other hand, is the guf totally being nisbatel? No. The guf is accepting and letting the keich be nisgala according to its terms. The eye lets the nefesh be megala the keich hariyah, but through the terms of the eye. It works through this keli and through the various characters the eye has, and therefore it changes from one person to the other according to the type of keli that he has. The meyach, the brain, accepts the keich haseichel, but on the terms of the meyach, on the terms of the keli, and therefore it changes from person to person. When we talk about the ratzon, how does the ratzon work? Ratzon works a whole different way. As we see it, Al Rebbe does in Tanya Perich of Gimel, that the ratzon doesn't process itself in the guf. As soon as a person wants, b'derech memela, he does what the nefesh wants. Why is that? Because the way the ratzon is in nisgala in the guf is not that the guf accepts the ratzon in its terms. The guf loses itself to the ratzon. The guf is totally in his battle. There's no metzias of a guf. That is the difference of tzien and Yerushalayim. When we talk about tzien, there's still a metzias. I'm learning Teira, but I'm learning Teira b'havana v'asogeh. So as much as there's an emphasis on my bittul to the Teira, but I'm still using my havana v'asogeh, and there's still an emphasis on my havana v'asogeh. I'm learning Teira, I'm bottle, but it's on my terms. I still exist. I am trying to understand. So we have on one hand the bittul to higher, the simon to higher, but on one hand I didn't lose my mitzias totally. So with this level, as when you're still remain on mitzias, you can learn Teira, you can understand Teira, you can say birkas Teira, but you can only get to which level of Teira? To the Shem Elikim of the Teira, not higher. But when a Yid wants to get to the level of Havaya, Shem Havaya, which is Shem Ha'etzem, this demands of a Yid a much higher bittul, a much deeper bittul, a bittul which comes of the etzem of his neshama, and that's the bittul of Yerushalayim. Here, the bittul has to be not in mitzat seichel, not a seichel bittul. It has to be a bittul where the person loses himself totally. Over here, I bottle telukus not according to my terms. I'm like the goof being bottled to the nefesh. And where do you see the limud hatera? So the Rebbe says, let's see inside where the Rebbe writes, 235, on the left side, the line starts with the word ober. Aber das alt is nor benegei hasagas hatera. Was is nicht verbunden mit halacha lemaise. If them is maspik beginas ziehen, oder es ist nicht a hechrich onkommen zu beginas Yerushalayim. B'shas es kommt aber zu dvar havaye zu halacha. If them is nicht maspik beginas ziehen, bedarf haben shleimus hayira, und dvar havaye Yerushalayim. V'chim mevuer behemshech samich vov, as pasken in halacha be'emes la'amitei, kemen nor durch shleimus hayira. Hat meire, Tomer Cholilo wird sein Psak Halochen, wird sein Bechuvon, kefi Rotzen ha'elyein, va'ad hepech Rachmon al-Itzlan von Rotzen ha'elyein. So when a person opens up, a Yid opens up the Teire, the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, and he wants to paskin halacha, what is his emphasis? His emphasis is not only on the part of Havane v'Hasoge. His emphasis is, there's an Eibishter, I'm afraid, have to make sure I paskin the right halacha. And what's going to be chas v'sholom if I pass not the right thing? What's going to have a shayla if I should make a beiri priyetz or beiri priyadoma? What's going to be if I will not make the right bracha? Maybe it will be a shalva bracha or batola. It will not be how the rotzen elyon is, or maybe even the opposite. And this pachad puts him in such a level of bittul that this reaches Shem Havaya, and then he's zeicha to be mechavin lahalocho. Then he's zeicha to reach the madrege, which is called the rotzen ha'elyein, which has no hagbolus and comes down till mato, which is the chelek ha'alocha shebateira. The Maimer Samechvav mentions a very interesting fact. It says, we mentioned before in the Sicha, that halacha was like Besil. The Chatchila was not clear how we're going to paskin. Some people did this, some people did that, and then they decided Nimnu v'Gomru to paskin like Besil. And the Gemara is a very interesting thing. Even though Bishamai were more sharper than Beis Hillel, but Beis Hillel were Neichin va'aluvin. They were more sensitive, they were more bitteldik. And therefore, because of their bittel, therefore the halacha was like them. And Al-Pichsidis is very understood. Because without that, what does that mean? When we're talking about paskening, learning, it goes according to the sharpness. Now what's negiyah? The bittel. But now we understand, because when we want to be mechavel halacha, we want to reach the madrega of Shem Havaya, it's demanded a higher level of bittul, and this level of bittul had Besil more than Beishamai. Die ihre Ruf be'amareisa noch größer und starkere Yigi und Hamaki in Teire. Now that I'm so afraid, I have this pachad on me. Now when I learn, this brings out a much deeper level of understanding. Bis zum Mechaven sein, die Halache be'emes la'amitosa. Und das ist der Pirish von Dvar Havayim Yerushalayim. Shleimus hayira. Bechdei zum Mechaven sein, die Halache la'amitosa is nicht maspik ira stam, wie ira se'enesh. Oder afila hechere darge beire. What's ira se'enesh? It's also built, I'm afraid of a punishment. But of course, a person who's afraid from a punishment, he's still a metzias. He's not totally bottled. Again, he's taking a lukus on his terms. I'm afraid for myself. And even higher levels in Yira, not necessarily means you're totally bottled. Do is neitig the shleimus dike Yira. Shemo lo yechavin l'rotzin ha'elyin. So the emphasis here is not on himself. The emphasis is, what does the Eibishter want? Was bringt the shleimus dike maskone von halacha be'emes la'amitei. Before we continue, it's very interesting to point out a few others. Just one point from Order 52. We'll not go through the whole Arichis, but to mention, because I'm sure many of you are thinking this question. In many Mamorim of Lag Ba'emer, we learn that Rashbi said on himself, brought on his Zayar, Ano Simona Be'alma. I am only a simon, a reflection of what's going on Lamaila. And this explains, what does it mean? Ano Simona Be'alma. It means that he was so bottled that all he was is, when you looked at Rashbi, what did you see? You didn't see a mitzvahs. It was only a reflection, a siman on Leima. So over there, it comes out in many places of Chassidus, we're using the same term of siman, but we mean a very high level of bittul. And then our Sicha, which is based on other mamorim, comes out on the contrary, that the inyan of siman is a chisoring, is not the highest level of yira. And the Rebbe is metavich, the Rebbe puts together these two explanations, but we will not go on this inyan ba'arichis. We will also take a mention of order 54. The Rebbe explains, Al derech hachiluk bein Teira lemitzvahs. This is a very fundamental idea in the Rebbe's Sichos. The Rebbe explains what is the difference of Teira and mitzvahs. The Lashon of Chassidus, when a person does a mitzvah, is like a eved doing the ratzon of the adin. When a person learns Teira, is not like a eved doing the ratzon of the adin. When you learn Teira, you are the adin. In the Lashon of the Rebbe, mitzvahs is an inyan of bittul. Teira is yichud, which means when you do a mitzvah, what's the pshat in a mitzvah? I like a eved. The eved is not to be fined. The eved is still befkeda nichila. He has his own wishes. Eloma, I have no choice. I have to be mevatel myself, but I still remain a mitzvahs. So he didn't become miyuchid. He didn't become one with the adin. He's not the adin. He's another mitzvahs doing what the adin wants. But the inyan of Teira is yichud. When you learn Teira, your mitzvahs, your chachma becomes one with the chachma of the Eibishter. The Melo, that's what the Gemara says, man malki rabbanon. The chachamim are the melachim, not like avodim doing what the melech wants. They are the melachim, yichud. And the same idea is by Teira, it's the same idea as Tzin Yerushalayim. Tzin, you're a siman, you're a mitzvahs, it's a siman on something higher, but it's not you, it's not yichud, not one. And Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is when your mitzvahs becomes a mitzvahs from Yid. In Siv Zayin, the Rebbe goes on in Siv Zayin Aches to explain how this inyan, which we explained, Tzin Yerushalayim, is also connected to what it says before the Psukim of Atareisa, Malchuscha, Malchus Kol Ilomim, Memshaltecha Bechol Deir Vadeir. It's an unbelievable idea. We'll say it over first Baal Peh. And again, as we mentioned, it's a little bit different than what most of us learned in the Mamorim of Reish Hashanah. That's why it's important to bring out the Chiddush of this Sicha, how the Rebbe explains the inyan of Malchus, Malchus and Memshalah. We always learn the Mamorim of Reish Hashanah, there's the inyan of Malchus and Memshalah, a king, and a Moishel, which in English they say it's a dictator, although it's not 100% meduyik, but we'll use this word just to make it easier to understand. And the difference of a Melucha and a Meishel is that a Melucha means berotzen. As we say, Malchusi berotzen in Kibulu Alayim. Melucha means that the Am accepted on themselves with their own will. They come to the Melech, they make Hachtore, and they beg the Melech that they want the Melech to be a Melech. A Meishel means that it's not because of the rotzen of the Am. No one asks the Am, you want the Melech, you don't want the Melech. This person has a special keach, a keach hamemshola, to be able to just control, a keach of controlling, and the Am just becomes this battle to him without even them asking him to become a melech. That's the keach of memshola. For example, the Marshal brought in Chassidus is behemoth, a shepherd on behemoth. He's not called, not a dictator. The behemoth he has a scare to control the behemoths, and they have to be mevatel themselves to the shepherd whether they want or they don't. Now, always in Chassidus we learn that Meluch is a higher level of Nemshola because it's more connected to the Am, it's Berotzen, it's not Baal Korcham, and this the Rebbe brings down in Ha'ara 65, that many places is mentioned Memshol is lower than Meluch. But in this Maimah the Rebbe brings out, no, there's a mile in Memshol over Meluch, and that is because when you have the Ein of Meluch, what does it mean? The Melech is my Melech, he's my Balabos. But why is he my Balabos? Because I want. Because we agreed to that. And we asked him. When I say that he is my melech cause I asked, how bottle you ever will be to the melech, you're not totally bottle. Because your rotzen is involved here, and your mitzias is involved. And if your mitzias is involved, it's not total bit. On the contrary, davke memshola, where you're not a man do omar, no one asks you for your opinion, davke memshola is a much higher level. And therefore we say this posik of Kimitzi Teisei Seirot Varavayim Yerushalayim. In continuation, when we say Binat Aresa, Malchuscho Malchus Kolilomi Umemshaltecho Bechol Deir Vadeir. There is the union of Meluche. Meluche is like the union of Tzin. Umemshaltecho Bechol Deir Vadeir. After the union of Memshole, this is connected to the union of Udvar Havaye Mirushalayim. And where is this emphasized? Just like we said, Benegeya Halocho. And what's the mile of halacha? And because it's bli gvul, so therefore it comes down lamata mata until elam hazeh hagashmi. The same when we're talking about umemshaltecha. The emphasis is bechol deir v'deir, in every level and in every time. And therefore the Rebbe explains is that going back to the beginning of the Sicha. How did the pasuk begin? V'holchu amim rabim. That is this. Eir, because it's an Eir b'li gvul, so it has no hagbola to any level it can reach, and therefore it even reaches the level of Amim Rabim. Even the nations will also hear this level of the Beis Hamikdash, this Meirudikir Gilui Eir, which will be La'asid, and they will come to the Beis Hamikdash to hear the Dvar Havai. This all the Rebbe talks about how it is. Benegia dinyan of Osid Lovei in Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, and then from Sivyuden on, the Rebbe explains that be'emes in generally these two inyonim of Mitzin and Yerushalayim, Melucha and Memshala, is basically the difference of Zman HaBayis and Zman HaGolus, and in more detail. And again, this is a very, very fundamental point in the Rebbe Sichas. Many Sichas the Rebbe explains brings in Ha'ara 72, Sicha Chelek Tes Pashas Ekev, Ha'ara 67, where the Rebbe explains this idea very, very Yisedisdik. When we ask someone, where is a higher level of Avodas Hashem, is man habayis or man hagolus? Of course, it is man habayis, man hagili elokus. Man hagolus is as man einon yichelim lalis v'leirois v'lishtachavis. We can't. We don't have the level of ishtachavoh, the level of bittul pnimi. It's a much lower level, a lower madrega in bittul. We don't have any ri'in elokus, and so Memela Bepashtos, the level, the Aveda of Zman HaGolus, is a lower level of Zman HaBayis. But the Rebbe here in this Sicha, like mentioned before in many other Sichas, especially in Chelek Tes Pashas Ekev, turns around the whole picture. On the contrary. When you're talking about the Zman HaBayis, so with Zman HaBayis, there's a Gili Elokus. And when you have a Gili Elokus, it's Gishmak. And b'meila, when you're serving the Eibishter, it's not only based on the Eibishter, not only based on Elokus, it's also based on your Metzias. I understand, I feel. It comes Man HaGolus. We don't feel anything. So why am I serving the Eibishter? Because the Eibishter wants. So we hear that the Aveda does not relate in any part to the person. Davke because Davke because we have no yire, and as I said before, no re'iyeh, and as we said before, it's a level of memshola, which means that it's not berotzein, our gishmak is not involved here, our hergish is not involved here. Davke because of that, the bittul is much more. I'm not taking a lukus on my terms. When I'm serving the Eibush, the mitzad re'iyeh, that's like tziyin. I'm a mitzias. I'm a metzius. I exist. So I bottle today, but it's on my terms. How I receive it with my re'iyah, how I get it. When there's no re'iyah, this is the emes kfiyah. This is a maila zman hagolus over the zman habayis. So now it's very interesting. So what's better, zman hagolus or zman habayis? On one hand, we're emphasizing the union of zman hagolus. On the other hand, we're emphasizing the maila of zman halosid lovei v'holchu amim rabim. So how does this fit together? And this is the nekuda which the Rebbe explains in the end of the Sicha in Sif Yud Aleph and Sif Yud Beis and Sif Yud Gimel, and we'll say it in one nekuda. And this is the nekuda the Rebbe brings out in all the Sichas. That l'osid lovei you will have both milas. We want to have the mila from tachlis habitl. That's number one. Tachlis habitl like zman hagolus. It shouldn't be based off my metzius. On the other hand, we want that this bittul telukus should should permeate the metzius of a yid. That his metzius gufa should be bottled and ganz. It's very hard to understand this. How do we have both things together? But I'll try to bring a dogma, which the Rebbe once said in a fabregi, not going to get this, but we can use it as a dogma to understand the union of the Sicha. You have a yid. It's coming Shabbos, Chassidische Yid. And it's coming Shabbos, and what's that? What's Shabbos, Chassidische Yid? To learn Chassidus, to daven, that's Shabbos. Ritamo, he opens a Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch tells him, listen, you have to eat basar shomim, you have to eat good flesh and good wine, and you have to even have pleasure from the flesh. But that's not his. It's not on his head, b'chlal. It's not what he's thinking about. But it says you have to. So what does he do? He takes the flesh, and he eats it, and he works on himself to have a geschmack of the flesh, because Teda said that you have to, and the Eibusher said you have to. So what happened over here? Did he have a geschmack? Yes, he did. But would this geschmack relate to him? Not at all. He had the geschmack because Teda said he has to. So he worked on himself to get this geschmack. This is what means that the bittul telukus permitted. And that's the nekuda that the Rebbe ends off the Sicha here. And that's the union of Yankiv. Avram is the union of Gilui Elokus, the Milo from Chesed. So you have the Milo from Gilui, the Milo have a geschmack in Elokus, we're missing the bittul. We have the union from Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Yira, or bittul, Kav HaGvura, but we're missing the Milo from the person, from connecting to the person, Mitziyas Adam. We're missing the Milo from Ahava. Yankiv is Teferes. Yankiv has both together. So Yankiv mitzad echad is Tachlis HaBittul, and the Yachad, the Tachlis HaBittul, is an Eifen of Gilui Elokus. It's Tachlis HaBittul, and how Elokus is begilui in the Mitziyas of the person. This is the union of Losid Lovei. Now to go back to the beginning of the Sicha, which we asked the question, how is it that Dafki by Yankiv Kori Bayis, and in together with that, we see that Begashmius, Yankiv was not in a matziv of Bayis. Yankiv was all over the place. What we learn in the end of the Sicha, Adarabe v'Adarabe. This is the Nekuda. Where do we see the union of Bayis? Where do we see the union of Bli Gvul? When wherever you are, in any level, in any darga, you are the same. When you're in the level of Chesed, I am Mugbol, like we said before, Shem Elikim is how Lukus expresses itself in different kavim, different dimensions. Chesed is only Chesed, so then it doesn't go hand in hand in Gvura. So when you have Gvura, you have a clash with Chesed, and when you have Gvura, the Chesed clashes with the Gvura. Yankiv, like the Rebbe always says, mitosei shleima. Yankiv is everywhere. Yankiv is briach atikin et mavriach men akotze el akotze. So he can be here, he can be Mitzrayim, he can be in Eretz Yisrael, and he always remains the same. There's no menaget to Yankiv, because Dafke Yankiv. Let's conclude now the line, the kav of the entire Sicha. So Davke Yanki, which is the yin of Nachla B'li Mitzorim, the yin of B'li Gvul. So Davke Yanki is connected to the yin of Bayis, which is the yin of Nitzchias, which is B'li Gvul. And Davke Yanki is connected, and therefore it expresses itself in the fact that it reaches even the Amim Rabim, say basically Yankiv. And therefore, Davke Mitzadat is Udvar Havayim Yerushalayim. We come to the yin of Haloche Havayim, we reach the Bitl of Shem Havayim, and it comes down even of Haloche Lamaisa. And therefore it expressed itself that there's no menagi, that in every place and in every matziv he remains Yankiv and remains Yankiv Bishleimus. And together with that, to bring it out in Aveda, it's not the pshat. Mitzad Echol, you have the Tachlis Abitl, and the person is out of the picture. That the Tachlis Abitl Gufa, we have both milos of Avram and Yitzchak. The mile of Zman HaGolus and Zman HaBayis. That the Tachlis Abitl of Shem Havaya, this Gufa comes down on Maisa Bepeil, and Aveda this means this Gufa permeates the Mitzias of them, and the Mitzias of the person becomes totally connected and united with Elokus. A feilige is Chedesh Kislev.